Hi there, this is Solitude Ronin from Solitude Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Assassination, or Assassin, by Masahiro Shinoda from 1964. This is the Eureka Master Cinema DVD and it's spine number 20. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't have a Blu-ray release, but it really should. Shinoda is a director that I probably should see more of. He did Pale Flower, which is an excellent gangster film in the same year, 1964. He also did Silence and Double Suicide, which I still haven't seen, to my shame. He was born in 1931. He's still alive currently, and he was making films up until 1999. On this disc you get an introduction by Alex Cox, which for me, every time I see an introduction by Alex Cox, it gives me goosebumps because it takes me back to the nostalgia of Moviedrome, which was a show on BBC Two where Alex Cox introduced interesting films that so many of them have become my favourites. So it's wonderful to see an introduction by Alex Cox. He explains the film a lot better than I'm going to, so I would highly recommend picking up this film and watching his introduction instead. I actually got this fairly cheaply on eBay. It's still available on eBay and also Amazon, so it's still kicking about if you want to check it out, and I highly recommend that you do because it's wonderful. But also, like I said, I think it's on the Criterion channel, or has been on the Criterion channel if you have access to that. This is a film that the plot is pretty complicated, as Alex Cox says. Donald Ritchie has commented before on its fairly hard to follow plot, but basically it's set in 1853 when American ships under the command of a guy called Matthew Perry, before he was in Friends, obviously, turned up in Edo, I believe, and essentially it was an attempt to get Japan, who had been in isolation for hundreds of years. Even I think Portugal had reached Japan by mistake before 1853. I'm sure they were in the 1600s, were they not? But at the time you have the Shogunate, who were in favour of opening the borders or opening the country up to the west, and the Emperor, it wasn't fully the Emperor. There was still the remnants of the Shogunate who were still more powerful than the Emperor at the time. So the Emperor wanted to keep Japan isolated and repel the foreigners, essentially, and the Shogunate wanted to open the trade channels. And it follows a character called Kiwakawa, who is on the side of the Emperor, but during the film kind of change sides and shifts allegiances, and characters shift allegiances. So it does get a little bit convoluted. And there's also a flashback structure, because we learn from characters about the previous exploits of Kiwakawa. So sometimes there's flashbacks within flashbacks, which again can sometimes be a little bit confusing as far as what time are we actually in. But the thing is, all the politics of it and the history of it and the sometimes confusing structure of it doesn't actually matter, because it's just so well done. It's just so beautiful. Like I said, this really deserves a Blu-ray because it's got crisp black and white photography. This is a restored print and it does look really good. Shinoda is always doing interesting things, from wipes and whip pans. He also does freeze frame at times, which works really effectively. You know, some directors use freeze frames too much and it doesn't really have much point to it, but Shinoda uses it really well. Obviously the shot composition's beautiful because there's lots of walled streets, and again just the buildings of that time just lean themselves to beautiful compositions. So it's a stunning film. The central character, Kiwakawa, as we learn through flashbacks, even the people close to him don't really know his motivations and what's going on between his ears. So he is kind of distanced from us, but he's still like a riveting presence. The film does have one of the greatest decapitations in cinema history. It does have some brutal violence in it and kind of sudden violence in it, along with all the politicking. We do see Kiwakawa's human side, his relationship with a woman called Oren. But he does have this power over people. His followers are devoted to him. At one point he pens a poem and then within minutes his followers are singing the poem. As Alex Cox points out, you know, Shinoda wasn't like his contemporaries as far as being on the left. He was a big believer in the emperor, and the emperor as a deity, and after the Second World War he was actually shocked and upset that the emperor we found out he was like an ordinary person. So again, I think in the 60s, again, the infiltration of the West into Japan. So I think this was a kind of statement about that, just by looking back to the first time the West in America, in kind of the form of American ships, came in and landed in Japan. Again, Kiwakawa's plan is to get all these Ronin, who are obviously out of work, and band them together as an army and march on Kyoto. But again, his plan changes, his allegiances change. You have there is a guy who is employed by the Shogunate, who's played by the actor who played the rookie in Seven Samurai. And he gets more and more obsessed about Kiwakawa, and he finds out more about Kiwakawa's past and his events and the kind of brutality of the man who will pretty much let people around him die just to get his goal. There's a whole wonderful scene about the sword that Kiwakawa uses, which has it's a 7-star sword, which means it's kind of special and destined for great things. So Kiwakawa certainly buys into that, even though he got the sword from his father, who bought it from a lord that went bankrupt and was selling off his goods. So it's not as if it was actually in his family. So he has the plan for essentially starting his own shogunate, which was obviously against the emperor. So it's like, which side is he on? Because he's a kind of mysterious character. I mean, people actually refer to him during the film as the mysterious Kiwakawa. So it is hard to tell what his motivations are. At times, you know, he gets a note at one point from one of his closest friends and allies that pretty much says, I don't even understand you, so I'm leaving. So he's perhaps like a hard character to get into, but then that just adds to, what's he doing, why is he doing that? So it does become compelling. And again, it's so beautiful visually. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. Even though, like I said, it does have some brutality and violence. But it kind of speaks to Shinoda's strength as a storyteller, the fact that all the politics and all the kind of machinations, we get a kind of exposition screed voiceover at the start of the film to try, to explain the setting. But despite all that, it still works and it's still very entertaining, because that really doesn't matter that much, because again, it's just the story of one man who has a plan, and really the ends to which he'll go to actually see that through. Whether he does or not, you'll have to watch the film. The assassination of the title really refers to the start of the film, where somebody who was pro one side, I'll probably get it wrong if I make a stab at it, if you'll pardon the pun. Somebody on one side who's an advocate of it gets assassinated, and that kind of kicked the whole situation off, which led to the events of the film. It is a wonderful film that, again, I would highly recommend you check out if you haven't already, if you're fans of Shinoda. Again, like I say, I'm going to have to try and find more Shinoda films. I was actually surprised he was still making them up until 1999. As Alex Cox said, Kon Ichiwa said that Assassination was probably Shinoda's finest work, and I would say it's perhaps my favourite that I've seen so far. So thanks very much for joining me for this Assassination. Again, let me know in the comments if you've seen Assassination by Shinoda, or what Shinoda films I should really check out. And again, thanks very much for watching, and hope you'll join me for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying cheerio.